Welcome to year 2 of your Unity experience. Today, what we're going to do is just get familiar with the new Unity Hub interface, which is different than what you have had previously, as well as get used to just using 3D view and what that looks like and how that changes things. So I've already set up a plain project, but just to show you the process, your screen should look something like this. Dismiss this little notification here, but it should say new. There's a drop down on here, and that is so you can select which version of Unity you'd like to create your new project in. Right now I'm running 2019 .1.0 F2. May not be quite the newest one, but right now the 2019 versions are all pretty much the same. So as long as you're running a 2019 version of Unity, all should be well. So when I click New Project, the screen looks very different than it did before. What we have is a little bit more visual, I would say. So right here, I'm going to choose just 3D. I don't need 3D with extras. The extras that it also has presets and example content built into it with the post-processing stack and things like that. But we'll worry about adding that stuff whenever the time comes so that it's a faster load time for now. So I'm going to just do a regular 3D project, and I'm going to call this project, let's call it, let's say 3D learning. And then I'm going to choose where I want to put it. In my case, I've made a folder called Unity Projects. You can leave it at the default location, won't hurt you any. So I'm going to hit create. And of course, it will take a moment to go ahead and load and figure out all of its settings. You may get something like this, most likely not, that tells you that you need to update Unity. I'm just going to ignore it. I'm not going to hit skip because maybe I do want to update it later, but for now I'll close out of it. So right off the bat, this is different than what you originally had. What you had before was just a flat gray area. Basically, you were looking at this, where it's only the grid and just the floor. But now we have access to another axis, which is two words that sound very alike but are different, very different. So you can see as I drag this around, I am right clicking on my mouse to change the view that I have of my screen. So what I have is an x-axis. If I click on X, it'll zoom in straight from the X side. My y-axis, like so, and my z-axis are all on here if you want to click to flip directions and focus in directly, or you can right click to drag around like so. It's automatically set to that particular orientation. So over here, I've actually already organized my screen back to look like this. So if you are comfortable looking at my projects looking like this, then stick with it. That's good. Remember, if you want to save your layout, so I'm going to call this teaching layout because this is my layout that I use whenever I'm teaching you all. So if, say, I wanted to change it, I can go to the default layout that you would start with, or I can go back to my teaching layout really easily. So let's talk about adding things into your scene. So before, we added a lot of sprites to our scene as our basic objects. So we used, down here in our assets, we created some basic objects. But right here, I'm going to go up to the hierarchy. I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a 3D object. In this case, let's start with something simple. We'll start with a plane. So what a plane is an object that has no side over here. This is like no depth at all. It is just a flat surface that you can see from the top and the bottom and then directly on the edge. If I were to get, hyper accurate, I wouldn't be able to see the edge of it. So I'm going to scroll out a little bit. All right. So I have a plane. And it looks very different over here, yeah? So there's no specific color or anything like that, no specific different types of settings. It's just very different stuff. So we have a mesh collider that's automatically been added, a mesh renderer that's got blend probes. These are all things that come standard with your object. So right now, material-wise, we don't have anything here. So what we need to do, I'm going to come down to my assets folder. I'm going to create a folder first. I'm going to call it materials. And in my materials folder, I'm going to create a material. We'll call this plain. Let's call it plain underscore material. And I want to change, let's say, the color, and you can preview what that's going to look like right down there. I'll make it, do I want red? Red's kind of spooky. Let's go with purple. And all of these are different options that you can change how the material reacts to its environment. So I can change the smoothness of it. So whenever I drag smoothness all the way down, it looks very matte, almost kind of like velvet. If I turn it all the way up, it looks like it's made of like a, I don't know, shiny marble. I can change how metallic it is, which basically raises the contrast. And there's all kinds of different things that I can fiddle with here, but right now that's enough for me. So let's go back to our plane right here and see if we can add this material to our plane. So whenever you drag it over, plane material. So now it doesn't have any like light or anything on it, so all those cool effects we're not really going to see the effect of, but that is how we've now added our first material to the scene. So on my purple plane, we can add, let's try a cube for our scene. And you can change, just like with Sprite, we have the same different tools. So we've got our translate tool, which moves the location in space. We've got our rotate tool, which changes the rotation. Now, instead of 2 directions, we have 3, so you can rotate it like this. You can rotate it like this, or like this. So you can do it in 3 dimensions. This is our scale tool, so maybe I want to make it very big. And let's move it up on top of our plane. You could see it before because it was selected and outlined, but now it's very large on the back of my scene. And I can also scale, just like with a sprite, with the scale tool. However, now instead of having the just 4 edges on the outside edges, it's every plane of the surface has its own little draggy ball that I can use. So I could add a material to this. I could do all kinds of things with it, but right now I'm just going to leave it alone. So let's set up. I'm going to challenge you to set up a scene. So what we have here, these are basic shapes that you can use to kind of mock up a scene or set up an environment, just a simple one. We're going to be using simple shapes in our first project, so I want you to get comfortable with how you can edit them, how you can place them, how they move around. So I want you to create a scene of a house using objects. So you can do this in any number of ways, and I'm first going to give you some tips. So let's say this cube is the base of my house. First of all, we want to name it right. So we're going to call this house base. And I'm going to make it all one word because you know how I like to do that. They're plain. We'll call this ground. Let's see, we have a directional light somewhere in this scene, but I don't. Oh, I see it now. Okay, let's grab this guy and move it here. And we'll deal with that more later. So we've got house base and ground. So anything I want to build associated with the house, I probably want to make the house the parent object and add things to it. So if I were to right click on house base itself, and then create another object. Let's say I want my door next. I'm going to make another cube. And right now it's very large, right? So let's make this smaller. That's rotation. There we go. So I'm going to make it kind of door shaped and then bring it in this way. Like so. And then I'm going to drag it in to the house. I'm going to stick it out just a little bit for this particular shape. And I need some materials, right? So right now everything is just white and I can't see it all. So I'm going to create in my materials folder another material. And we'll call this one door material. Oh. Door matte. And usually material you can shorten to matte, and that's generally understood to be what it is. Go for kind of a brown color. Yeah, warm brown. I don't want like a gross green brown. I don't want it to be metallic at all, and I think I don't want it to be like very shiny, so I'm going to do that. And then on my cube, I'm going to apply my doormat, which is not in fact a doormat, though you can add that to yours, and then I'll call this door base. Now inside of door base, say I wanted a door knob, so I'd right click on door base, make myself, I don't know, a capsule or a sphere. I don't think a capsule is I probably want a sphere. So let's go 3D object. That's not the right thing. I'm out of practice too, so this is good for us both. So I'm going to scroll in just a little bit here. I'm middle clicking, like clicking on my scroll wheel to access the ability to move around like so. And I'm going to make this way smaller. And this is probably not the most efficient way to do this right now, but it'll work. And I'm going to move it up onto my door. And so on and so forth. So eventually I'd like you to build a fully fledged house. I'm going to give you an entire class period to just work with this. Using only your simple materials and creating simple objects and creating basic materials. I would recommend making it so that your house kind of has more than just a door and a window and a plain roof. I want you to like go into detail a little bit. You'll have a whole class period and there's lots of different objects that you can mess with. You can see I've already got the light kind of casting onto the door there. You can see the shadow of that knob showing, which is neat. So you can play with the directional light. So say, and whenever you're working on your house, you obviously don't want everything childed under your door. So you'll probably want to, create another object. And if you want, you can also always create an empty. Remember, create empty and store everything within that. So that it all collapses down nice and neat and tidy. So just getting the hang of using these objects and making from those objects more complex things and keeping your hierarchy nice and tidy at the same time. So there's your challenge for today, and I'm excited to see what you come up with.